There was a moment when I almost didn't make it. I sat alone in the dark with the pistol in my hand. I had fallen apart, and the worst part was no one knew. People like us, we don't know how to stop. We don't pause. We don't take a knee unless we're injured. And even then, we fight to get back up. But what happens when the injury is invisible? When the weight becomes too much to carry? That moment nearly cost me everything. My family, my mission, my life. My name is Doug White. I'm a retired law enforcement officer and a veteran. For more than 30 years, I wore 2 uniforms, but I had one mission: to serve something greater than myself. During my career, I drove harder and faster than my peers, setting a bar that only a few could match, until finally, the weight of it all caught me. My break came in the darkness. But with grit, hard work, and the right people in my corner, my break became my breakthrough. And now, I tell this story so you can tell yours. Welcome to Tell This Story, the podcast for veterans, first responders, and those that love them. Here we dive into the unspoken truth, the hard-earned lessons, and more importantly, the path forward. This isn't just about surviving your story. It's about becoming the person you were meant to be. Because I believe resilience is good, but growth is better. If no one's told you this yet, it's okay to be okay. You deserve to live better. You deserve to grow greater. You deserve to be stronger than before. This podcast was inspired by my book, Hiding in Plain Sight: The Truth About Trauma, Service, and the Way Forward. If you haven't read it yet, grab a copy wherever books are sold, or visit DougWhiteOfficial.com. A special thanks to our sponsor, Polestar Coffee. Veteran-owned and operated, craft roasted with a purpose, and delivered to your front door. Fuel your mission at PolestarCoffee.com and use this story at checkout for 10% off your order. If this podcast speaks to you, share it, rate it, and most of all, live it. Because you're not alone. Your story's not over. And the best part about it is, you get to decide what happens next. Today we have the honor of speaking with Jerry Shaffer, a dedicated advocate for veterans and their loved ones. Jerry is the co-founder and executive director of the Red Star Foundation, an organization committed to supporting families affected by suicides of veterans and first responders. With a rich background as a Marine Corps veteran, educator, and entrepreneur, Jerry has devoted his life to service and community support. Jerry, welcome to Tell This Story. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Doug. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm actually very excited about sitting down and talking to you and doing this episode today. I know that when we had our call last week, it was supposed to be, 20 or 30 minutes. It turned out to be more than an hour. And I remember commenting that we should have recorded this whole thing because it would have been the podcast episode. But
it was
we can work out the kinks. What's that?
It was well worth that hour.
It was. I learned quite a bit about you and the Red Star Foundation. It's an amazing organization and a fantastic idea. I can't believe that it's taken as long as it did for someone to come up with that idea. But before we get into the foundation, let's talk about you. What's your background? What brought you into where you are now?
Yeah, well, very interesting. Just like anything else in life, you just don't go from point A to point B. It looks more like a jagged line and probably a bunch of circles in order to get to point B than to C to D. But I grew up in a small town outside of Buffalo, New York. And right after high school, I joined the Marine Corps. From the Marine Corps, I was in actually during the first Gulf War. Didn't go over stateside. And when I exited the Marine Corps, I went to college at a university called IUP, Indiana University of Pennsylvania, which has absolutely nothing to do with Indiana or Indiana University. It's about an hour and a half outside of Pittsburgh. And it's funny, Doug, because I went there to play football. That's all that I cared about. I didn't care about getting a degree. I didn't care about getting an education. My passion was really for football. And somehow along the way, I ended up getting a degree, fortunately, and became an elementary school teacher. Went down to Reston, Virginia, and taught there for about 4.5 years. And I had an entrepreneurial spirit. The whole time I was in college, I was actually working on a business plan, trying to figure out how I was going to do it. And I was at a crossroads in my life back in 2001. I literally had applied for a professor's job at a college, and I was either going to go that route or I was going to step out and try this business thing. And I decided to do the business route in 2001, and I haven't looked back. I've started up a couple different companies and actually started a couple nonprofits as well. What I really found was my niche was veterans, their family, taking care of them, trying to help them out. And so for the past 25 years, I've been in that veteran community, both with my nonprofits and for-profits. So when this Red Star idea came along, I just jumped on it. And obviously we're going to talk a lot more about it, but it really hit home and resonated with me for different reasons than probably most. But at the end of the day, like you said, this should have happened many, many years ago. And so thankfully we started it. It's going now, and it's really picking up a lot of steam. A lot of people are getting involved with it, and we're really excited about what we're doing and the fact that it has an opportunity to save lives.
It's absolutely important. I wanted to go back and actually make a comment about your transition from Marine Corps to elementary school teacher. And I can only imagine the culture shock that may have been. And being former Air Force myself, I wanted to take an opportunity for the veterans that are listening now and make a Marine joke and say it may not have been that big of a culture shock dealing with elementary school children and younger enlisted Marines, but I decided I'll stay away from that one.
Hey, nothing's off the table, Doug.
Well, I'm sure you had to keep count of paste and crayons during class, though.
Absolutely.
Anyway, so
it's funny that you bring that up, though, because just before I graduated, I actually got a job 3 weeks before I graduated college, and just, God's hand was in it, ended up having some job openings. And this was back in December. It wasn't, through at the end of the year when they're hiring all the teachers. Normally, when you go for a teaching position at the end of the winter, if you graduate in the winter in December, then they make you a substitute. So you're a substitute throughout until summertime, and then you can apply for jobs and you can be brought on full time when there's job openings and they know who they need and where they need them. In my situation, I found 3 interviews. I drove to them, had them in December before I even graduated. They ended up, all of them being full-time positions, and I was fortunate to get one. But where that fits in here is the position that I got when I did the interview. The principal and the vice principal were sitting down. The principal was Army, and the vice principal actually ended up being from the Pittsburgh area and knew my college very well. And as we're going through this interview, it was very good. They did a phenomenal job. One of the things that they brought up was, we see on your resume that you're a Marine. You're going to be handling kids. Do you see anything that you did in the Marine Corps that is going to affect your ability to be a teacher here? And I said, absolutely. I said, there's absolutely no question about it. There has to be structure. There has to be discipline still. But at the same time, they're kids. They're little children. So you have to have the compassion and the empathy. And you can't be a drill instructor, right? You can't be that company gunny. And so, that was a question that they asked me.
So it's amazing to me that they would think that you would probably give a 3rd grader a knife hand to direct them to the playground, but
I may have on
I'm sure it's in some place.
I can't confirm or deny that I did or I didn't, but I will tell you that I absolutely loved it. I fell in love with it. In my first year, I was nominated for a National Teacher of the Year award for first-year teachers. And obviously, I was further advanced than most first-year teachers because I had gone into the Marine Corps, so I was older during my first job. But it was just a phenomenal experience. I really wished, even when I left, I absolutely loved it. If I could have started a business and taught at the same time, I would have. I would have stayed there and done both.
Well, let me ask you a question about that, because one of the things that we talk about here on Tell the Story is the transition from a life of service and in particular, being a teacher. That's a pensionable job. Now, I know that I don't even know how the retirement structure worked in Reston, but I would imagine that at some point you're vested and you have the safety of that pensionable job and benefits and everything else like that. What was it then that drove you to leave that pensionable job and go off into business and work this business plan? I mean, that had to take a lot of drive and determination. I mean, knowing that this is clearly what you enjoy, what you want. What was that like, pulling the trigger and just going for it?
Well, ironically, the year that I was leaving, I was actually just getting tenure. So that security blanket was there. But like I said, I probably wouldn't have stayed in that role because I was looking to move up to be a professor. So I would have went to a higher education institute. But, I debated heavily on it. I prayed about it. I didn't know where God was going to lead me with it. At the time, I was very, in a way, fortunate. I wasn't married. I didn't have children. So if I went out and started my own business and I starved, I only had to worry about myself. I didn't have a family that I had to worry about. And that, relieved some of the pressure. And at the end of the day, my first business, by the way, all of my businesses have been structured to help people, not just make money. I mean, obviously, you need to make money and you need to generate revenue. But that wasn't the core of any of the businesses that I've started. The core was that, hey, this can help people. In my first company, I was actually working with the Marine Corps and helping the Marine Corps. And some of that turned into recruiting. But really, somewhere along the line, I think when I first started getting into teaching is when I figured out that, that servant leadership and that I was wired to teach people and I was wired to serve people. And so that made all the difference. Even in taking that step, I was still helping people. And then that eventually grew. You and I had a discussion offline about having so many things going on and trying to pull back and trying to prioritize. You and I are very similar. And even when I started my first company, I was doing the same thing. I was trying to help anyone and everyone in the veterans community that I could. And it was overwhelming. I mean, many times it was very overwhelming. But you get past that, you just push through it like a Marine would, and everything turns out okay. Everything works out, and I'm a better person because of it. And I know that I've helped and I've made a difference, and I'm continuing to make a difference.
Oh, that's important. It's the mission, just be mission focused. And I'm a firm believer, and before I started on doing all of this, I determined that it's time to be a missionary and not a mercenary. It's not about the money. It's about helping people. And that authenticity comes through. I mean, people, especially with the spaces that we're trying to move in, the veteran community, the first responder community, they're very suspicious people, and they're very authentic people. They're very straightforward. And if they think something is off or a little bit fishy, if you lose credibility in those worlds, you never get it back. So you have to be real when you come through the door. So yeah, that's pretty interesting. So being in service and helping people, what inspired you to establish or to help establish Red Star Foundation?
Yeah. So Red Star Foundation is literally 8 months old. It's not very old whatsoever. The story behind it is back in July, the end of July, I was at a veteran social. We were out at a restaurant with a group of other veterans. There happened to be this woman there that was from New York City, but had married and lived up by the Buffalo, New York area. So we're just having a conversation. By the way, I'm from outside of Buffalo. We had a shared stories and we started talking. And then she shared with me that her husband, who was last stationed out of MacDill, and he had died by suicide. He was in the Army for 24 years, had only been out for 4 years, and he took his life, leaving behind his wife and a set of twins. And as she's talking to me, she starts making comments about she wishes that, she had someone to talk to figure out if she's entitled to anything, if her children are entitled to anything, benefit-wise, scholarships, those sorts of things. And then she made the comment to me that really just stuck in my brain, housing group. And she said, I wish that there was a network like the Gold Star families. And I thought to myself, there has to be. Veteran suicide is the biggest issue facing the military and veterans community for a long, long time. And there has to be some nationwide network that is dedicated to veteran suicide. And again, I just assumed that there was. Matter of fact, I told her, let me go home, let me do a little bit of research, let me get some resources and send them to you. What ended up happening is I come home, I start to do the research, and I didn't find anything. I did find an organization called TAPS. tragedy assistant program for survivors, and very good organization, but they're not solely focused on suicide. So they handle any type of tragedy that's happening to veterans or military. And I would later find out that about 30% of their time is spent on suicide, which is good, but it's not solely focused and dedicated to these families. And so I'm looking at that and I start to do a little bit more research. And since 1950, so 1950, 75 years ago, start of the Korean War till now, there's been 102,000 KIAs. So people that have died during combat, which means there's 102,000 Gold Star family members from that time. Since 2001, when the VA first started tracking veteran suicide, till today, which is 24 years, there's been over 150,000 veteran suicides. 150,000 in 24 years versus 102,000 in 75 years. There's something off here. There's something very, very wrong. And again, we've known that there's issues with suicide. I just didn't understand the depth of it. And as I'm sitting here thinking to myself, how can there not be a network out there for these family members to take care of them? Who's helping them? Who's counseling them? And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of great organizations that are pretty much localized. So Tampa is an area that has a lot of different veteran suicide resources, some for the family members, and they're scattered throughout the United States, but they're meant to work in those communities. They're not meant to be a nationwide network. And I sat there and I said, well, somebody has to do it. Why not me? And literally 2 days later, which now we're getting in the beginning of August, I filed the paperwork with the state of Florida. I started the nonprofit. It became a nonprofit on August 7th. So August 7th is our official birth date. And then I actually submitted for the IRS status, the tax exempt status, which traditionally can take 3 or 4 months. And I know how to fast track them. Let's just put it to you that way. And so I literally got that back in 30 days. So on September 7th, I got a letter stating that we were approved as a C3 IRS tax exempt. And that's how we got started.
That's amazing. And I wanted to go back to the numbers. I know we spoke about it last week, and I was completely just dumbfounded by that. We had a side conversation about how that 150,000 suicides that have been tracked. Is there any way that's accurate, or could it be much higher than that?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's a lot higher than that. And there's a lot of other people that would agree to that. Couple things with the VA's numbers. I know several years ago, they came out with the 22 a day. And so that's what you hear about. You hear about the 22 a day. I think 3 years ago, the VA came out with their latest numbers and they said it was 17. And they said, hey, we're doing a good job. We've reduced it from 22 to 17. I was a little leery about that.
They're spending a lot of money to do it.
Yeah.
But they're not really getting it done.
And then this year, back, I think in November, they released the new findings and they said it's 17 and a half. Here's the problem with that. The VA itself only has half of the veteran population registered in their system. So out of roughly 19 million veterans, there's 9.6 registered in the VA healthcare system that they're tracking. Okay. So the other half is just out there. They're doing a good job now. They're trying to get a hold of these veterans. And even if they're not entitled to any benefits, they're trying to get them into the system. The other thing is that there's a lot of these suicides that are not labeled as suicide. So for example, there's people that intentionally overdose, right? Fentanyl, heroin, they're intentionally trying to take their lives. People know it, but it's not labeled as a suicide. It's labeled as an overdose. There's people that drive head on into traffic or off a cliff that are intentionally trying to die. And that's not labeled a suicide. That's labeled a traffic accident. In my conversations with a few different organizations, they believe that it's somewhere near 35 to 50 is the real number, which is even scarier than we can ever imagine. I mean, 22 a day, that's a lot. I mean, you're looking at 22 a day, you're looking at over 8,000 veterans a year. And then you factor in the 500 military and the 500 first responders every year, that's 9,000 people. And now you're saying that it might actually be doubled than that. it could be 18,000 people.
Yes, and I do know from a law enforcement standpoint, not all of the roughly 18,000 law enforcement agencies in the country report to the Uniform Crime Report. So there are agencies out there that are not reporting suicides as part of the numbers, the national numbers. And if they were, how many of those actually say, was this person a veteran? I know that I responded to a dozen or more myself that were veterans, and nowhere in the report except my own memory and my own notation was that this person's a veteran. So, I mean, there's a lot that's not being tracked. When you started the idea and the groundwork for Red Star, and I think this is awesome. You said, why not me? And I don't think I have some influence over this. So the name of this episode is going to be Why Not Me? I think that was perfect when you said it. I actually had to pause and write it down. But what were some of the, I wouldn't even say walls, but what were some of the smaller obstacles that you had to get around? Because starting a nonprofit is not necessarily easy for someone who's never done it before. Was there anything that you had to break through here in the Tampa Bay area? I know that we are rich with veteran nonprofits. Was there any trouble you breaking through that barrier to get this done?
Yeah, so it's very interesting because the answer to that is no. And I'll explain. First of all, I have started a nonprofit. We also, Sergeant Major Gene Overstreet, who's a 12th Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps, and I have been partnered for the past 20 years, both for-profit and nonprofit-wise. But we started a organization called Veteran Forces back in 2012. So this isn't my first rodeo. It isn't my first go-around with a nonprofit. That's why I knew how to get it done quickly. I knew how to get the IRS status done quickly as well. And what I found, Doug, is that the need for what we're doing is so deep. Almost everyone is touched by a suicide. It may not be a family member. They may not be a veteran. They may not be a first responder, but they've been touched by a friend, a colleague, and we'll get into some of those numbers later on. But as soon as I started telling people about this, immediately they're like, I need to get you in touch with this person. I need you to get in front of this person. I share a story with you. So literally this organization is a month old. I go to Washington, D.C. I'm there for the 8th and I, the Friday evening parade that the Marine Corps has at the Marine Barracks in D.C. And I bring another Marine, a Vietnam veteran who is now a priest up in Dunedin. And by the way, he's got a Purple Heart and a Bronze Star. So he was a badass when he was in the Marine Corps. I brought him up there. Sergeant Major Overstreet flew in for it. And we're just talking, and I'm explaining this whole idea, this whole concept that's literally, a week old. And he says, I need to get you in front of the mayor of Clearwater. I said, okay, if you think so. The following week, I'm in the mayor's office with Father Bob Swick, and I'm 30 seconds into my pitch explaining what we're doing. And the mayor starts to tear up. He says, hang on a second. He looks at Father Bob and he says, I haven't even shared this with you, but my father was an Army veteran and he took his life when he was 50. Who would have known? He doesn't share that with people and has no idea. And the mayor's been instrumental in getting this off the ground and helping out and opening up doors. A couple of weeks later, I jump on the horn with a congressman, actually Marine Corps Lieutenant General Jack Bergman out of Michigan. And I get on a phone call and I brief him on, what we're trying to do. And he loved the idea. He said, listen, I'm right in the middle of a re-election campaign. Matter of fact, I was surprised that he took a call. It was only about a month and a half out before the election. Figured he would be busy campaigning. And he said, I see real value in this. Let me get past the election and we'll figure out, what we're going to do next. Literally a week after the election, I get an email from one of his staffers saying, we're going to read this into the congressional record in Congress. And from there, it's just been off and running. I mean, how you and I met. I was talking with Brianne Brown and she said, I think that you should talk with Doug and you guys have a lot going on and you're like-minded and you have the similar mission. So these doors have been opened. I'm meeting more and more people on this. And at the end of the day, just about everybody just about the entire population of the United States has been impacted by a suicide somehow, some way. Could have been a friend, could have been a coworker, could have been a classmate, someone.
No, absolutely. And I'm amazed at the traction and the headway that Red Star Foundation has made in such a short amount of time. And it goes to show you when you're on the right mission with the right people, anything can be done. So I think that's amazing.
Well, we're certainly mission oriented, and we've been working to, get a team together to really push this. I have a West Point graduate, a retired lieutenant colonel on my board, Greg Tiley. I have an Air Force retiree, David Vargas, and obviously Father Bob Swick was a Marine, Sergeant Major Overstreet was a Marine. And then Richie McAdoo, who lives up in New York, is a Navy veteran and also a 30-year firefighter. That's on our board. So we're getting some people that are mission oriented and, that they're driving this.
That's amazing. What are some of the core values that are driving the foundation?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest value that we have is somebody's life. I mean, we value that life, and we're trying to obviously get them to see not necessarily that their life has value. I mean, we obviously, that's a no-brainer. We want everyone to think that their life has value, but that, number one, there's other people like you out there, other people that are suffering, people that you can talk to, people that you can share experiences with. And number two, that there are people that care about you, even though they don't know you. You're working to save veterans' lives that you've never met. Thousands of them that you will never, ever meet. But yet you're putting in the time and the effort because you care about a person you've never met before. Why? Because you have an affinity for veterans. You have an affinity for law enforcement. You have an affinity for firemen. And they all share a common bond to begin with. I mean, a lot of them are veterans. I mean, a lot of people that serve in law enforcement and fire department were prior military, but both of those organizations are paramilitary organizations. So the structure, the discipline is very similar in order to operate effectively.
It is. What are some of the key programs that Red Star is doing that's driving their mission?
Yeah. So we have 4 programs that we came up with, and the beauty of these programs are they're all unique. One of the things that as we were starting to take a look at everything that we were doing or what we could do and what everyone else was doing is you see a lot of overlap. There's a lot of people and organizations doing the same things. And I'm not saying that it's a bad thing. I'm just saying we're doing the same things, but we're not moving the needle, right? So we have counseling. We have these, I guess, local support groups. They're throwing money at the VA. They're throwing money at some of these charities, but the numbers aren't coming down. So what can we do? And that's the question that we asked. What can we do that's different? What can have that big impact? So we came up with 4 programs. The first program is the peer-to-peer network. So we are looking to set up chapters around the country, just like the Gold Star families. By the way, I've had conversations with both the Gold Star moms and the Gold Star families of America as well. The presidents and both of them love this concept. They love the idea, but we're trying to mirror what they're doing around the country, trying to mirror, honestly, it's no different than the Legion and the VFW. We're looking to have chapters around the country where we can bring these family members together. We can collaborate and bring the resources in those local communities together. And oh yeah, by the way, maybe you haven't suffered a loss in your family, or maybe the loss that you suffered wasn't a veteran. That doesn't mean you can't be a part of this network. We still want you to be a part of this network because your story is going to help someone else. And that network, that community, getting out and doing events together, doing life together, we think that that's very important. So that's the first one. The second one, which was secondary when we were thinking about all of this, but really has taken on a life of its own, is the Red Star Service Banner Program. So you're familiar with the Gold Star families and how that operates, correct? For the audience that may not know, a Gold Star family member is someone that lost a loved one, family member during war in combat. So they were killed in action. They are given a banner. That the United States gives the family a banner to the next of kin, and they also give them a little gold pin that they can wear. And so, matter of fact, I have a Gold Star banner right here. So that's what a Gold Star banner looks like. So what we did is we created our own banner. So following in the footsteps, oh yeah, by the way, there is a Blue Star banner as well. And the Blue Star banner is if you have a family member that is in the military. So not necessarily deceased, obviously not KIA, but they just serve in the military. So you'll see some Blue Star banners as well. Matter of fact, I have a Blue Star one here too. So that's what the Blue Star banner looks like. Same banner, but the star is blue. And we said, hey, we need to come up with our own banner. As many people as died by suicide, obviously a lot more than the KIAs, we need to come up with our own banner to really recognize their service and recognize the family members and the sacrifice that they've had to make. So here is the Red Star banner. And we just changed the border here to a blue and then a red star. So this is what was recognized by Congress, by the way. So January 28th of this year, Congressman Bergman read this into the congressional record. And what that does is that introduces this to the Congress. And then we'll have further discussions about them actually recognizing it officially. So we did that. And then we also created our own pin that we give out to the next of kin along with that banner. And here is the Red Star pin. So I'll try to get a zoom in here so you can see it. It's actually 3D. And what we didn't even think about at the time, Doug, and didn't realize is that, and let me backtrack a little bit. I've always been an arm's length away from veteran suicide. So our other nonprofit, Veteran Forces, we're doing some things for veteran suicide, but we're not in the mix of it. We're not up to our knees or up to our necks in it. And we're not talking these people one-on-one. We're providing some resources and some things that essentially will get them out into the public and get them connected into the public. So we were always at an arm's length away. And with this, it's been a learning curve. Right? Understanding, researching, getting the data, being able to understand the problems, the issues of not just the veterans themselves, but also now the family members, right? Trying to figure out what they're going through and how we can help them out, how we can have the biggest impact. And so as we're probably 2 months into this, we started talking about these family members being Red Star family members. So a Red Star wife, a Red Star mom, a Red Star daughter, as opposed to a suicide loss survivor, which is now what their label is. And every time I heard that, I was just thinking to myself, who would want to be known or labeled or introduced in a public setting that way to come up and talk? And, that whole word suicide, I mean, one of the biggest problems there is the stigma of suicide. So obviously it brings a lot of embarrassment. It brings a lot of pain. People don't want to talk about it. They don't want to open up about it. They don't want to admit their son or daughter or spouse, their kids, or whoever it may be. They don't want to admit, and they struggle with that. So that suicide is very, very strong, and it's very, very deep rooted. And when you look at that label, I can understand why it's even deeper rooted than what it is. And so I started talking with some Red Star family members that we've given these banners out to. How they would feel being called a Red Star wife, a Red Star mom, as opposed to being labeled suicide survivor, loss survivor. And they love the idea, love the concept. And I've gotten emails, I've gotten testimonies already about what an impact that has made. So once we can get this out there and start having them labeled, I think you're going to see a reduction in that stigma. I think when you have this peer-to-peer network coming together where they're able to open up, they're able to talk, that they're wearing, that pin out in public. Someone asks them, hey, what's that pin? They get to the point where they can start to share that, right? And they can start to open up about it. And at the end of the day, that's meant to also honor that veteran or that first responder, not because of the act that they had done, but because of the fact that they did sacrifice. They served their country regardless of anything else they did after that. So they still serve their country. They still deserve some honor, and it brings some dignity to them and some respect to them and their family members. So that is the second program. The third program is called the Red Star Pledge. And what we have started doing, and we're going to be doing around the country more, is we're going to go to different military bases. We're going to go to American Legion halls. We're going to go to civic organizations, and we're going to give a presentation. And at the end of that presentation, we're going to do two things. Number one, we're going to show a video, which I'll tell you about in a second. But the first thing we're going to do is we're going to ask them to take a pledge. And, the Red Star Pledge is just a promise to yourself and others that you will not take your own life. That promise comes with an understanding that your life has value and it has purpose. No matter how dark or depressing your day is, you have someone that cares about you and they want you to live. And so we ask them to take this pledge. And after they take the pledge, we give them a Veterans Awareness Ribbon, which, by the way, a Veteran Suicide Awareness Ribbon, which we also created. So that's the ribbon itself. And I'll tell you about this in a second. But we have them take that pledge, and we ask them to take that pledge. No peer pressure. Hey, if you don't want to take it, fine. If you want to take it, great. We're going to give you that pin. We're going to give you a certificate. And our hope in that program is that whether you're right here, right now, thinking about suicide as you're sitting in that audience, or 6 months or 6 years down the road, you start to have those thoughts of suicide, maybe, maybe, you remember that you took this pledge. And maybe that stops you. And part of that pledge is that you promise to talk with someone before you do anything. So if you're thinking about it, you're making a promise that I'm going to go talk with somebody first. So that's the pledge program. And then the fourth program is called Red Star Voices. And what that is we are doing interviews of family members that have been impacted by suicide. We've done one already. It is extremely powerful. We have a teaser out right now, which you can find on our website, on YouTube, and on Vimeo. But it is very powerful. We brought in a Red Star mother that lost her son 3 years ago. He was an active duty Marine out in 29 Palms. She lives in St. Pete. And as I was talking to her about doing an interview, obviously she's a little reluctant. Who wants to get on camera and share that pain and that agony? And as we talked through this, I told her our vision for the Red Star Voices, which was that it's going to save lives. Someone's going to see this and they're not going to take that next step and actually ending their life. It's going to make them rethink. And our goal is to have 100 of these videos. And it's interesting about that video because I literally got on a phone call with this lady. Tanya is her name, by the way. And we talked for 2 hours. Great conversation. And so it was a 2-hour pre-interview is what it turned out to be. And then she came in and she sat down and did an interview for 2 hours. So here she is in front of the camera, in front of the lights, in front of people that she had never met before. And she's just pouring her heart out and sharing her story about her son. She knew that this video had purpose and that the purpose was to save lives. And so she allowed herself to go through that. And I have to tell you, Doug, after 2 hours, I felt like I had been run over by a truck.
I bet.
I can't imagine what she felt like, reliving a lot of this stuff. But one of the other purposes of this video was that there's a lot of these family members that just cannot talk, right? They can't get out the things that are inside of them in their heart and their minds. They can't articulate it. They don't have someone that they feel that they can share it with. And so part of our hope was that maybe they can get some things out. Maybe they get some things off their shoulders, off of their chest. And sure enough, there was 2 times that Tanya said to us, I haven't shared this with anybody. And then she shared it with us. And there was a burden that was lifted from that. And so that's the only video that we've shot right now. Let me fast forward a little bit because we were talking about these presentations. I went on to a military installation and we gave a presentation.
I was hoping you were going to say tell this story because I just loved it.
Yeah.
Let me set this up real quick. And I love that you're going to tell this because when we spoke last week, I had mentioned to you that having been involved in a couple of the nonprofits here in the area, there are great organizations out there, but there are some organizations that just, they do this one little thing. And they may do it well, they may not do it well, but there's really no work being done There's nothing that you can show that, hey, this thing's moving the needle, which is important. You want to make sure that what you're doing is making an impact. And right out of the gate, you guys, you freaking nailed it. And I think it's incredible. And I just want you to tell this story because I love it. It makes me feel good hearing it.
Yeah. It's, you know, I still look back on it and can't believe that it happened. And honestly, I mean, it's like this with this whole organization because it was never planned. It was born instantly and we just ran with it. We haven't really had time to sit there and look at it and be like, wow, I can't believe we've done all this in 8 months. But in terms of going on to this military installation, we had set it up that we were going to go out to this base and give a presentation. It ended up being 70 junior enlisted on this base. And we're talking maybe 18 to 20. I mean, I don't know if there was anybody there that was over 21 outside of the deputy commander that was there. But going into it, I'm thinking to myself, you know, these kids, they're not going to want to listen to this. They don't care about suicide. I mean, they got the world by the tail right now. They're young. They got some money in their pocket. They got a lot of other things going on. They're easily distracted. You know, I figured they'd be talking to one another. They'd be on their phones. They weren't really going to pay attention. But for us, it was a trial run, right? And we wanted to, you know, get something out there. We videoed it and we just wanted to work from that. So we can critique it, make it better, get ready for the next stop of this tour. And right from the beginning, these kids were leaning in. And I was shocked, and I'm a teacher, right? So I know how to shift gears and try to pull people back in. They never lost them. They were leaning in the entire time. And on a lot of these kids' face, you could see some pain and you could tell that this was having an impact on them. Most of my board was there. Sergeant Major Overstreet, 12th Sergeant Major Marine Corps is there. You know, he is a rock star just about everywhere he goes, no matter what, especially in a Marine community, but every base. And, you know, he was talking as well. And he even said, listen, when we're done here, come up to me. If you want to talk with somebody about anything, come up to me. I will give you my personal cell number. Now, here's a Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps offering to give these kids who he'd never met before his personal cell number. And
leadership.
Exactly.
That's what that is.
And you won't find much better than him, I guarantee you. And so kids were coming up to us. They were talking, they were thanking us. Almost all of them came up to us. They thanked us. They said, this is needed. Some of them shared some stories. At the end of this young girl comes up. She got tears in her eyes and she said, I just want to thank you for coming out here. Like, you don't know how much this means to me. I had a suicide in my family several years ago and it's really impacted my life. And as we're listening to her, you know, we weren't quite sure what to do or what to say. And we were just listening. And then all of a sudden she says, I need to be transparent with you. And I want to let you know that I tried suicide 2 months ago. Now we're stunned. You know, what do we say here? Right. And she is talking about, she's, you know, going through counseling. She's feeling better about it. Once she's done with her counseling, they are going to discharge her. She's excited to go home. But then she said, you know, that video was so important to me. And she said, I never thought what my mom went through. I never thought about what she would go through if I try it again or if I actually do it. And I don't want to do that to my mom. When we did this video, I literally, part of what I mentioned to Tanya, what my board had talked about was that we want people to watch these videos to literally say, I can't do that to my mom. I can't do that to my wife. I can't do that to my spouse. I can't do that to my kids once they hear Tanya talking. First plate appearance, grand slam. I mean, it did exactly what we had intended. And when we did it, Doug, I mean, we weren't expecting any feedback. We weren't expecting, we hoped that it would save lives, but we weren't expecting anyone to come up to us and say, hey, it's made a difference.
An immediate impact. That's incredible.
Immediate. And so it was phenomenal. And then the other thing we did is we had put up a QR code and we had asked them to take a survey. And we said, hey, be honest with us. We want the good, the bad, and the ugly. We're trying to make this better. We're trying to make this more impactful. If you didn't like it, tell us that. We're not going to be mad. So out of 70, I was expecting to get maybe 5 back, right? Young kids, who the hell wants to do a survey, right? We got 32. We got 32, almost half of the 70 gave us feedback. And it was overwhelmingly positive. And the feedback and the critiques were spot on. And it was just incredible. So that was day one.
It's amazing. And I loved that story when you shared it. I was just amazed that so many people engaged then, because, it's been my experience that it's like when you leave a conference on a Friday. Anybody got any questions? No. And if you do have a question, shut up, because everybody's trying to go. But for them to take the time afterwards to come up there and make those comments and be that forthcoming, it's amazing. And then the response in the surveys, it's proof. You've got it. You've figured it out. And I think it's very exciting. So what is next? What's on the horizon for Red Star?
Well, we did have a press conference with the mayor of Clearwater back on January 28th, and that was kind of our launch pad there. So we let the community know about us. We had press there. We were on ABC. We were on NBC, local stations, local affiliates. We were in the Tampa Times. And matter of fact, they took that story from Friday that they wrote and published and then put it on the cover of the Tampa Bay Times on Monday. So we actually made the front page on Monday, which was a digital copy. You can still get that online. And from there, we've had more conversations at the congressional level. I've met with other senators. I'm talking with local Florida reps here. I'm being introduced to everybody that you can imagine in the suicide, first responder, and veterans community, which is how I met Brianne. And I'm going to take her training here actually this weekend. She's having a training out in Clearwater that I'm going to attend. And we are working to start our first chapter, which should be here local in the Tampa area. So we have someone that's going to be working on that is actually been working on that. So that should launch. And then I've also been being asked left and right to come and be speaker, speak at this event, that event, keynote speaker. And so it's very exciting that we have an opportunity to get our brand out there, to create this type of awareness, because, if this was in a vacuum, it's not going to save any lives. So for us, getting out there and letting people know about it, even Facebook. I mean, I've been posting a lot more on Facebook than I have in the past, and just publishing all the great things. And it's just about getting that out there, letting people know about it.
Can people get involved and help spread the message?
Well, there's a few different things that you can do. First of all, obviously, you can always donate. Just like any other organization, we're always in need of funding. If you go to redstarfoundation.org, you can learn more about us and also look on there as well in terms of funding options and donation options. You can have us out as a guest speaker to talk about our foundation. You can volunteer. Right now, we don't have a whole lot going on compared to what we have planned anyhow. In terms of events, we don't have a whole lot going on at the moment, but that's going to change pretty rapidly here. And we're going to start to have events and things going on across the nation. And then to build that peer-to-peer network, we're going to need people all around the country to be a part of that as well. And I've already been contacted by people in other states saying that they want to be a part of this and want to be part of a chapter when it's launched. And we do have an event that the Sergeant Anthony Molstat Foundation is putting on June 7th, and we're helping them out with that. They're doing a ruck and a 5K that you can either walk or run. And I think this is the third year that Tanya's done it. The lady from the video is the one that puts this on for her son. And it's been very successful. I think she said she had 500-600 people attend last year. I think that was her second year. So this is her third year. It should be bigger. And there'll be a lot of military out there, veterans. The Marine Corps is going to be out there. And we're getting involved actually through our foundation. We're signing people up to do some peer-to-peer fundraising. If you go online, you can find that as well, where you can help raise funds, and all of that's going to be donated to their foundation. It's not our fundraiser. We're going to give it all to them. But you can be part of what's called the Red Star Ruckers. And If you raise at least $50, you'll get a t-shirt. And if you raise more than that, there's other prizes as well that you can get. That's another way that you can help. And then, if you know anybody, Brianne, connected me with you, and that's been very positive. And you and I are going to do a lot together, especially in that law enforcement world, the first responder world. And that's exactly what we needed. I'm a veteran, so it's very easy for me to be engaged in the veteran community, but I'm not engaged in the first responder community. And even though I know a few people and we've had some conversations, I think that what you're doing, helps get us to the front of the line, and that collaborative effort between us will help your organization and what you're trying to do and what we're doing as well. And so just having us come out and be a part of your event, and even if it's us just joining in the event, whether it's a social, whether it's a run, whether it's a charitable function, a fundraising function, we'd love to come out.
Well, it's amazing. I think you're doing remarkable work. And I was just so amazed after we finished our conversation last week, and just how quickly everything is coming together, and the impact that you guys are already making, especially with, those junior enlisted folks. It's still stuck in my mind, because I can't even imagine thinking back many, many years ago when I was something that I would have, one, attended something like that, and two, would have spoken up and said anything. It's remarkable that our youth and our young service members are that emotionally intelligent enough to understand that this is something they should be paying attention to, that it is an issue and something that should be addressed. And I think it's remarkable that you guys are providing an outlet for that. So, do you have any parting thought? What's that?
Yeah, and it was interesting too, Doug, because, and you just made a comment, made me think of it, but this was voluntary. They didn't have to come. They weren't forced to come. The deputy commander out there, didn't tell them to come. It was up to them. And I'll tell you what, a big shout out to Angela Vaca from the USO, because it was her idea. And she's the one that really made that happen. But at the end of the day, it's an invitation to come. It's not mandatory, and they still showed up.
No, that's remarkable, because they literally had anything else to do, but they saw that it was important enough to come. So that it's remarkable. Jerry, do you have any parting thoughts for our listeners?
There's probably someone listening to this right now that have had some suicidal thoughts. Maybe they're contemplating at the moment. Maybe they've had a plan. Maybe they've actually tried at one point or another. For all of them, I would say, I'm glad you're still here, and thank God you're still here. And there's a reason that you're still here. There's a purpose still here. If you are struggling, if you have any issues, there are a lot of organizations that will help. First of all, you can dial the 988 suicide crisis hotline for veterans. There's also a text line that you can call as well. I forget what the number of that is. I just talked to them last week, but they have a number that you can text and just talk with them. A lot of people that actually text them are just struggling. They're having problems. They're not necessarily suicidal, but they do have quite a few that are suicidal as well. So, engage with somebody, before you do something, before you go that far, that you're looking to take it and end your life, have a conversation with somebody. There's organizations out there, contact the Red Star Foundation. We have a phone number that's not a crisis line, so you might get an answer machine. We'll get back with you, but you can email us as well, and we'll get back to you. But there's a lot of organizations out there that will help. But talk with somebody first. Don't take that step. Don't do that to your parents. Don't do that to your spouse. Don't do that to your kids. Don't.
Yeah, I think the message here is the world is a much better place with you in it. Despite what you may be thinking at that moment, you're not necessarily in the right space. Speaking from someone who sat there and had that moment, your brain is telling you things that aren't necessarily accurate. So stopping and taking that pause to have that conversation is key advice. Jerry, I'm so grateful for everything that you're doing and for you coming on to tell this story today. We'll make sure that any way that we can contact you and support the Red Star Foundation, we'll have the links in the show notes and everything else. And I appreciate your time today.
Well, thank you for having me on, and thank you, Doug. One of the reasons that we got together is because we do have the same mission. And what you're doing with your book, what you're doing with your podcast, it has one intent, and that intent is to save lives. And so you are making a difference, and you're going to continue to make a difference. If you never did another podcast again and this stayed on YouTube for 10 years and one person comes across it and they change their mind, it's worth it. That one person would make this worth it what you've already done. And obviously you're not going to stop. You're going to continue to grow with what you're doing, and you're going to continue to get out there and talk with people and educate people. But what you're doing is very, very important, and I appreciate that.
Well, thank you very much, Jerry. And thanks for tuning in to tell this story, and we'll catch you next time.
Thank you, Doug.
Thank you. That's it for this episode of Tell the Story. Huge thanks to our guest, Jerry Shaffer, for spending time with us today and talking about the Red Star Foundation and all the wonderful work they're doing. If something he said resonated with you, something that made you pause or reflect, tell somebody about it. Because when one person speaks, give others permission to do the same. This isn't a podcast. This is a movement, a mission. The mission is to become the person you were meant to be. If today's conversation hit home, like it, rate it, and share the episode. So you never miss a moment. You can grab my book, Hiding in Plain Sight, at DougWhiteOfficial.com or anywhere books are sold. If you're ready to bring this message to your organization, reach out and book me for your next event. And of course, a big thanks to our sponsor, Polestar Coffee. Veteran-owned, operated, craft roasted with a purpose. Head to polestarcoffee.com and use code THISSTORY for 10% off. Until next time, remember this: you can break or you can break through, and your story isn't over.